Chapter 11. Alicia froze as her anxiety flared. She always hated the unknown of someone knocking on her door, even without the ominous prediction of her son. Kenny did not seem concerned at all. He immediately jumped up and started towards the door. Alicia shook her head and tried to gesture him to sit down. Instead, he rolled his eyes at her and continued towards the door. She moved towards her son and gently grabbed him by his shoulder. She put her fingers to her lips, hoping that if they were quiet, whoever was on the other side of the door would go away. Except Kenny extended his hand and twisted the doorknob. The door opened, both of them facing the man on the other side. He was taller than Alicia, nearing 6 feet. His chin was long, his lips plump and straight, and his hair was a shade of pearl. Black sunglasses covered his eyes despite the lowering sun. Alicia grabbed Kenny's shirt and moved him behind her. This was the man who had been following her. He reached up and took off his sunglasses with one hand while he extended his arm for a handshake with the other. Alicia ignored it. All she could see was his sapphire eyes, the bluest eyes she had ever seen. The eyes that had haunted her dreams for years. "Hi, He stopped when Alicia released a frightened squeak and slammed the door on his hand, catching it between the frame and the door. She kept pushing, trying to get this man out of her house. The man started pushing back. He leveraged his foot between the door and the door frame, releasing his hand, but Alicia could not close the gap. The man was stronger than her. Even as she used all her weight, he was making the door open inch by inch. He pushed his shoulder into the opening and then his chest. Alicia's palms began to sweat, and her grip slipped as one of his hands reached through, trying to grab her. The panic threatened to overwhelm her as she realized she was going to lose. Alicia abandoned the door. Her heart pounded in her chest as she ran. She picked up her son with one arm and reached for the larger of the packed bags with her free hand, aided by the adrenaline rushing through her body. Then she ran into the bathroom. She put her son and the bag down and hurriedly locked the door. She didn't even pause as she turned her attention towards opening the bathroom window. Alicia's arms burned as she pushed up at the window, but it didn't move. She pushed harder, putting as much of her body weight into it as she could. When the window began to release, relief flooded through her, but she continued pushing until the window opened completely. She pushed on the corners of the screen and watched it fall to the ground. It was only about a 4-foot drop to the ground. They could do this. She turned around, ready to help her son out the window, and found that he had unlocked the bathroom door. Both the man and her son were standing there watching her. She reached out and grabbed her son, moving him between her body and the window. The man didn't stop her. "Get out of my house or I will call the police," Alicia said. "I'm here to help you." The man's voice was smooth and creamy. He had an accent that she couldn't quite place. It was a combination of Midwestern and a hint of old European. "You had your chance to help. You just stood there instead. I'm very aware of what kind of man you are. Now get out of my house." The man's stoic face didn't change at her accusation. "Have there been occurrences around your son recently?" Alicia tried to figure out the best way to get her son out of the house. She couldn't see any weapons on the man, but she could be wrong. He also hadn't moved any further into the bedroom, but he didn't need to. He would be on them before she could do anything. Maybe a dead houseplant that came back to life. Perhaps you have seen things that shouldn't be here, like a lost toy. Or maybe he was playing hide-and-seek, and no matter how much you looked for him, you couldn't find him. Did he heal someone? Maybe a cut you received or a scraped-up knee. You were at his school. Who knows what you talked with them about? So there have been incidents. Which one? What do you mean, which one? What type of magic does he have? You are not seriously telling me that my son is some kind of witch. Am I a witch? Kenny ran out from behind Alicia and straight up to the man, grasping his hand. Kenny pulled away from the man's hand, realizing that it was red and swollen from the door. "Enough," Alicia said. "You need to leave my house right now." The man held up his hand. The swelling and discoloration were now completely gone. Kenny sat down on the bathroom floor, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Both Alicia and the man knelt to check on him. Alicia put her hand on his forehead, checking his temperature. "Are you okay? What happened?" Alicia asked. "That was nice work," the man said. He held up his healed hand for everyone to admire. "That must have taken a lot out of you. Most healers couldn't manage that untrained." "What the hell just happened?" Alicia said. this time towards the man. You can heal. The man ignored Alicia and talked to Kenny like they were the only two in the room. You mentioned a dragon. Can you do illusions also? They soon found themselves surrounded by multiple versions of the light-haired man. He was standing in the shower, walking in the hall, brushing his teeth at the sink, and one was even sitting on the toilet with his pants thankfully pulled up. Kenny just started giggling, and even the man finally cracked a slight grin. Alicia seemed to be the only one not amused. That was impressive. A master healer and illusionist. Even the king could not have pulled that off at your age, and he had the best tutors available. Alicia put her hand on the wall to steady herself. She closed her eyes and opened them again. When she still saw multiple versions of the man, she tried to find a logical explanation, except that there was only one. Her son could do magic. She watched the illusions wandering around the bathroom and froze when she saw her son standing in the middle of them. He was smiling, the kind that filled up his face and radiated joy. It had been a while since she had seen him this happy, and it was all her fault. She didn't understand, and he had paid the price. She straightened up and shook off her self-pity. Her son could do magic. Now she knew, and they could finally move forward. Except the man was still standing inside her house, the face that had haunted her nightmares for so many years. He's a witch, Alicia said. No, he's an elf. A half-elf. An elf? My son is not a little green man. I think that would be aliens. You're telling me that my son is an alien? No, like me, he is an elf, not an alien. That is ridiculous. You expect me to believe that you are an elf. Where are your pointy ears? I believe you are thinking of Vulcans. No, elves definitely have pointy ears. You do not have pointed ears. Your ears are distinctly human. I assure you that my ears are elf ears. Then what happened to them? Did you hide them or cut the tips off? Alicia's face crunched up in disgust. I didn't need to. Elf ears look just like human ears. You have read too many fairy tales. The man's voice raised as he spoke. I'm sorry, how was I supposed to know? Your son is an elf. Well, a half-elf. You can believe it or not believe it. I did not believe it until recently either. I would not have thought that he could have magic, but he does. The man paused and took a moment to recenter himself. Then he knelt down and spoke to Kenny. What other illusions have you managed? Kenny started talking about the dragons swooping over the playground when Alicia interrupted. What do you want with him? The man tore his eyes away from Kenny and looked at Alicia. Who are you, and what do you want with my son? She repeated. My name's Sadar. He held out his hand towards Alicia and waited through the awkward pause while she stared at him, not moving to shake it. Finally, he withdrew his hand, stood up, and continued. I was called when you came to the club. I figured you were trying to pull some scam to get back at him for, well, what happened. I was surprised that you had a son, and he looked so much like him. I figured I should look into it more, to find out that the king has a son and a half-human one at that. Honestly, it was impossible to believe. And now that you do believe, what do you plan to do now that you know this king person has a son? Alicia had not softened once. She did not like how close the man was to her son, or her son's apparent ease with him. Now he needs to be trained. I can take him to the king, and he can have tutors provided for him. They will teach him how to use his magic. He can live among his people. What are you talking about? He is among his people. He's staying with me. I don't care how rich that man is, he can't have my son. I mean, I guess you could come too. At least so you can see that the kid is safe. Sadar said it in such an offhanded way, like he thought that she would let him walk off with her child. Alicia moved over to her son and pulled him gently away. Kenny, now showing concern on his face, moved willingly to his mom. Let me repeat myself. You will never take my son away from me. Now get out of my house. Kenny gripped his mother's hand tightly. The house began to shake. The toothbrush holder fell off the sink and bounced off the laminate floor. Alicia was shocked at the sudden earthquake. She had never been in one before and tried to remember what to do. Before she could respond, Sadar took over the situation. It's okay, buddy. He held his hands up in the universal gesture of, I'm going to do no harm. I won't take you away from your mom, I promise. I want to help you learn to control your powers. We do not have to go anywhere if you don't want to. I can help you right here. Do you believe me?" As Kenny slowly nodded, the earth began to stop shaking. Did he do that? She looked at Sadar and then glanced at her son. Was that you? "I'm sorry, Mama," he said. Alicia picked him up and hugged him, rubbing his back to calm him down as much as herself.